Hi, Grandma here, and I am reading from Crispin. We're going to start with chapter 34, but first a little preview. Crispin and Bear are on their way to Great Wexly, and it is a big market day. They are on the road, but they've already run into so many people who are on their way to the same festival that's being held there. And Crispin said he's never seen so many colors. It was as if a rainbow had fallen down on these people. He wasn't aware that monks had different colored robes for different orders. So just the walk up there has been quite an experience for Crispin. But now they've reached the gate of the city, and the guards seem to be looking for someone. Bear and Crispin are very worried that they are looking for Crispin. And so that's how we begin chapter 34. Bear put a hand on my shoulder. "Crispin," he said softly, "try to show less worry. The worst disguise is fear." "What if they stop me?" "Oh, I don't think they will, but if they do, always remember what I told you. Run away. Head into a crowd. Your size will hide you." Watching intently, I saw that those trying to get into the town had formed two lines, which passed through a gauntlet of soldiers. As we slowly made our way forward, I could feel myself becoming increasingly timorous. "Here's a better way," Bear said into my ear. When I tell you to, when we're close to the gate, start playing your pipe, and I'll dance." "But won't that pay more attention?" I said. "Oh, do as I say," he said, but in so tense a fashion I dared not question him. Instead, we wedged along. Just as we approached the gate and the soldiers, Bear said, "Begin." I hastily made the sign of the cross over my heart, called on St. Giles to protect me, and with trembling fingers took up the recorder and began to play. Bear began to beat his drum and dance. People turned to look. There were smiles on their faces and from some applause. That included the soldiers. We fairly well danced our way up to the gate and through the town walls with not so much as an unkind look from anyone. "Well done," said Bear with a palpable sigh of relief as we entered Great Wexly itself. If I'd been amazed by what I'd seen on the road, I was more astonished once we were within the Great Wexly, for we had hardly passed through the gate when I saw more people, men, women, and children in that one moment than I had seen in all my life together. Just the din that burst upon my ears was beyond belief. People were shouting, calling, arguing, laughing, selling their wares to any and all from where they stood. Wandering water carriers were proclaiming what they sold. So were those who offered apples, lavenders, or ribbons. It was hard to know who was talking to whom. It all appeared to my eyes and ears like a flock of crows screaming at one another in a crowded field of newly threshed wheat. No, it was more like a dense forest, not of trees, but people. For we could not walk straight, but had to weave our way along, constantly bumping and banging into others. In Stromfield Village, you could not pass anyone without knowing them and receiving some nod of greeting, perhaps a grunted word or two. Even I received such notice. There, strangers were as rare as shooting stars and just as pretentious. But though Bear and I were strangers to Great Wexly, and I a wolf said, no one seemed to care, though they did glance at Bear, if only on account of his size. Still, what assaulted my senses more than anything, aside from the sheer numbers of people of all ages and the ensuing cacophony, was the stench that filled the air. Rotting goods, food, dung, manure, human slop, and swill, mixed together into such a ghastly brew as to make me want to swoon. In my village, refuse was heaved behind our houses. In Great Wexly, foulness lay on the wide road where we walked. This road was no longer dirt and mud, but laid out in stone. A filth-filled gutter, like an open gut, ran down its middle. Even as we passed, I saw house shutters opened and muck heaved out on the street, sometimes dousing passers-by to the hilarity of those watching, arousing fury from the victims. Nor was it only people I saw, but animals, pigs, chickens, goats, dogs, and rats, all of which scurried among the crowds with as little thought to people as the people seemed to give to them. Pressing in on the crowded, narrow streets were looming walls of close-built buildings, structures 2, sometimes 3 stories high, with slate, not thatch roofs. These houses were, for the most part, built of timber beam, with pale mortar filling in between the wood. Here and there stood stone buildings of even grander proportions. Many houses had their upper stories built so that they extended over the narrow streets, blotting out the sky. The houses had countless windows, mostly with shutters, but some with glass, more than I had ever seen before. As for doors, I did not think the world had so many. These people, I thought, must live their lives by little more than entries and exits. And again, on many places, there was black cloth draped with intertwining ribbons of blue and gold. I asked Bear what it meant. This time he replied, "Someone important has died." From numerous buildings hung great wooden images of things, a pig here, a helmet there, a fish, a jacket, a hoop, even a sheaf of wheat. These, as I was to discover, were emblems to inform passers-by of the nature of the business or goods made or sold therein. Tradesmen simply lowered their shutters into the streets, making a kind of shelf from which they marketed their goods. As for sleeping and eating, people did that in the 2nd or 3rd floor solars. There was so much to see. I barely looked at one thing, but felt compelled to look at yet another. Indeed, there were so many objects to look at that if I had had 10 eyes, I could not have seen them all. It made my head ache. More than once, Bear had to haul me in or yell, for dumbfounded by what I saw, I would halt in my tracks and stand in danger of being knocked down and trampled by the swarming people. For instance, I saw a bakery that sold bread that was swan white, something I had never seen before. And meat, I swear by Jesus' name, there was more meat than the whole kingdom could consume. I had always known that Stromfield Village had little enough to eat, but assumed it was no different from the rest of the world. Now I discovered how poor my village was. On and on we went until Bear unexpectedly grabbed me by my arm and swung me around. "Look," he said. We were in front of a building from which a straw-stuffed man, painted all in green, dangled from a pole. "What's that mean?" I asked. "It's the Green Man Tavern, where my affairs will be conducted." Bear boldly pushed through this doorway. Though I followed on his heels, I was more than a little hesitant, knowing his business, as he had said himself, was dangerous. Chapter 35. We entered into a large room in which a few small tallow candles had been stuck into crannies in the walls. Despite the sputtering light, it was a dim and smoky place that reeked of bad ale, stale bread, and sour wine. Trestled tables and benches, more than I had ever seen in one place, stood near a low-beamed ceiling. The floor was made of thick wood slabs, strewn with dirty rushes. To one side stood a kind of counter, upon which sat rows of wooden tankards. Behind this counter stood a large, buxom woman dressed in a brown, grease-spotted kirtle. She had lopsided white linen cap upon her dark and gray-streaked tresses. Around her waist was a belt of glassy rosary beads from which dangled a leather purse. Wooden pattens were on her feet. As for her face, it was flushed and rosy red. Her nose was flat, as if it had once been broken. Her cheeks were sunken too. Withal, she cast off a brimming, bustling force. When we came forward, she squinted to see who was there. As Bear loomed large before her, a grand grin spread upon her face, revealing not joy, but a complete lack of teeth. "God's wounds!" she cried with lisping, spittle-sprayed laughter. "It's the bear, set loose among us again." "And on my honor," Bear said, his voice booming, his arms spread wide, "it's the Widow Daventry." The two embraced in the middle of the room. "Welcome back to Great Wexly," the woman said, pushing Bear away as she looked him up and down. "I was wondering if you'd come, but you've been true." "Fair lady," Bear laughed, making a mock bow, "I always keep my word." "But once again I fear you have not come to court me," she said. "Alas, it's my other business," said he. Then, to my astonishment, the woman smote him hard in the chest with a tight fist, a blow which only made him laugh even more. Not content with that assault, she pulled his beard and tweaked his cheek. "And what escapades have befallen you since you were here last?" she asked, laughing with such delight I could not keep from grinning too. "Many an adventure, you can be sure," he said, "and there stands one of them." Bear pointed at me. The woman turned, considered me with squinty eyes. "Is he yours, or did you find him in some swamp?" Before he answered, Bear looked around. What he might have been searching for, I don't know, for only the three of us were there. "Oh, it was God's grace that let him find me." "How did that happen?" "We met in an abandoned village. He had fled his village." "Did he?" the woman said, and looked at me with new interest. "For what reason?" "In search of a grander world," said Bear. "And what of his father, his mother?" "Both gone to a better world." "An orphan, then, and not pursued?" she asked, clearly relishing the tale. "Oh, that's another matter," Bear said with a frown. "But by the laws of this realm," he said, "he's fully bound to me now, my apprentice, and a likely lad." It felt good to hear his praise. "What's your name?" she asked me. I made myself look up. "It's Crispin." "Now, that's a high-born name for a lowly lad," the woman said. "But, Crispin, pay no heed to my bantering. Bear's friends are mine. Welcome to the Green Man's Inn. Where do you come from?" When I hesitated, Bear said, "Crispin, name your village." "Stromford," I said. "Oh, never heard of it," the woman said with a shrug. "One of Lord Fornival's holdings," Bear said. "Lord Fornival," the woman said, turning from me back to Bear. "Have you heard the news?" "That Lord Fornival died?" he said. "Aye, 2 weeks ago," the woman said. As Bear made the sign of the cross over his heart, I said, "How did you know?" Not sure which surprised me more, that he had known or that he hadn't told me. "The black cloth draped around town," he replied, "and the extra soldiers at the gate." "Oh, to be sure," the woman said. "When great men die, there's always unrest. He died in his bed," she added, "from the wounds he earned at the French wars. I suppose it will only encourage your enterprise," she said with some unease. "Widow," he said, "it's not my enterprise." As I watched and listened to the two of them, it was clear she had more knowledge of Bear and his business than I. It gave me a jealous pang. Who will succeed the Lord?" "He has no legal heirs," the woman said, "though it's been rumored there are some illegitimate ones." "And all his property?" "It now belongs to the widow, the Lady Furnival, unless some bastard son with an army at his back makes a claim, or until she marries. If she marries, but they say that's unlikely. She's not the type to relinquish her new powers. She never traveled with Lord Furnival, but preferred to stay in her court. You know what women say, she added with a grin. If the first marriage is a gift from God, the second comes straight from hell. That said, there was an awkward moment of silence. Bear was tense. I did not know exactly what had occurred, but it made me recall something Father Quinnell had told me once at confession. A moment of silence in the midst of talk means death's angel is close at hand. I shuddered. Chapter 36. But you, she said to Bear, must sit and slake your thirst. I want to know all you've learned since you've last been here. If you'll be so good as to fetch me the key to my room in the solar, the special one, he added, I'll settle the boy, then we can speak. Though realizing I was being put aside, I said nothing but simply followed Bear. Key in one hand, he led me up the steps to the second story. I had never climbed so high in a building before, so high that I furtively put a hand to the wall to steady myself. We went along a dark, narrow hallway until we reached a door which he unlocked. Our solar, he informed me. Go on. I stepped inside, but by the little light that seeped through a shuttered window, I observed a small room. Old rushes lay on the floor. A small, low table stood in one corner. In another corner was a large pallet of hay. The place had a rank, close smell of sweat and ale that made me slightly ill, used as I was to open air. Bear fluffed up the pallet. Bear, what? This building is so high. Might it fall down? He looked at me for a disbelieving moment, then erupted with one of his big laughs. There is no chance, none. There was a knock on the door. Widow Daventry entered. In her hands was a bowl with meat in thick sauce. Pieces of bread were mixed in. To my surprise, she offered it to me. I took it gratefully. Yours is below, she said to Bear, and left. I sat on the hay cross-legged, bowl in my lap, horn spoon in hand. As Bear removed his dagger and laid it on the table, I said, Will we perform here? I asked. Oh, I think not, he said to my further surprise. Our time here will be very short, but I must show you something. He went to the wall and felt about the wooden boards. This is a special room, he said. My friend below always gives it to me. Under the pressure of his hands, a slab of wood popped out from the wall. It's a hiding place. It will hold you, and me too, for that matter, if there's need. Will there be a need? Oh, by all the heaven's sacred saints, I pray not. Bear, I said, looking directly at him, what is it you really do? He laughed. When we met, he said, you dared not even ask my name. Now you stare brazenly at me and presume to ask of my affairs. Have we risen in the world or fallen? That's for you to say, I said. As to what I really do, he said, with a placating smile, I'm a fool because I should like to be in heaven before I die. He reached for the door. I don't want to stay here, I said. It's close and ill-smelling. You'll do as you're told. Yes, master, I said, knowing my saying would irritate him. Then at least don't lock the door. Oh, I won't, he said, then paused. For a moment I thought he would speak more, but all he said was, Crispin, on your life, Remain here until I return. With that, he left. Feeling more aggrieved, I ate the food, then lay back upon the straw. I was not very happy. Why, I asked myself, should I remain in such a stuffy place while he did as he pleased? Besides, my glimpses of the town had only whetted my curiosity, and I had a penny of my own. There was much still to see, but it sounded as if Bear intended to keep me in the room for what now appeared to be a short stay. For a while I remained where I was, though as time passed I fretted more and more. Finally, I got up, walked to the door, peeked into the hall, seeing no one about. I made up my mind to wander the town for a short time. My intent was that I would return before Bear even noticed I had left. I was just about to leave when I went to the table and plucked up Bear's sheathed dagger and hid it under my tunic. Had he not taught me to use it? Was not this the town in which to claim my liberties? Moving quietly, I crept halfway down the stairs and listened. From somewhere, I could hear the murmurs of Bear's talk as well as Widow Daventry's. Exactly where they were, I didn't know. I continued down until I was certain no one was in the tavern room. At the base of the steps, I decided it would be better if I didn't use the front door, lest they see me. Instead, I made a sharp turn, went along a narrow hall, and at the end of it, I reached a small door. Pushing it open, I stepped into an alley that had the most appalling stench. It was the place where the privies were set over the ditches. Holding my nose, I shut the door behind me and raced away. Do you know what a privy is? It's an outdoor toilet. We sometimes call them outhouses. Today, they are more like porta potties, but without the chemicals to neutralize the smell. But what he's saying is they had that ditch that went down the middle of the street that all of the garbage, people's, what shall I say? They didn't have bathrooms. They didn't have toilets. So what it goes into a toilet would actually go into that ditch in the center of the street. And the privies at the back of the Green Man Tavern are set over that ditch so that immediately all of that gets in the ditch. Sounds like a pretty stinky place to be. Now, is Crispin supposed to be leaving the Green Man Tavern? Do you think he's going to get into trouble? Do you think Bear will get angry with him? Do you think he'll have a good time, spend a penny? Well, we'll find out next time. Bye-bye.